Hi everyone, this is Mehmet Sheikh, and in today's video I will discuss about the concept of default arguments. Okay, so I have written down some points and an example as well. So with the help of these points and example we will try to understand this concept of default arguments. Okay, so let us start our discussion with the first point. Function calls are responsible to pass arguments to functions. Okay, so in our earlier classes we have already discussed about the concept of functions. Okay, so now what this first point is saying is function calls are responsible to pass arguments to functions. Okay, so here you can see I have made a function call. Okay, so it's the responsibility of this function call to pass the arguments to the function. Okay, so here this is my calling function, and inside it I have passed values for a, b, c and d. Okay, and here you can see I have written down the implementation of this same function sum. Okay, and in this implementation of this function I have declared variables a, b, c and d. Okay, and here a is not been initialized any value, whereas b is initialized a value as 5, c is initialized a value of 10 and d is initialized a value of 15. Okay, so now whatever values I have assigned in this implementation of some function, these values are called as default arguments. Okay, so now when I make a call to this sum function inside the main by passing these values 10, 20, 30 and 40, so these values will get passed to a, b, c and d. Okay, and then we will make a sum of these numbers and then we will return that sum to its calling function, and where we will print that output. Okay, so here you can see one of the argument, which is a, is not been initialized any value. Okay, so in that case you can see it will take the value of this 10. Okay, so it will the value of 10 will get initialized to a. So here you can see I have made two calls for some function. Okay, in the first call of some function I have passed only the value for one parameter, one argument. I have passed only one argument, whereas in the second call of some function I have passed the value for four arguments. Okay, so now in the case where I have passed only one argument, this value will get passed to variable a. Okay, and what about the values for b, c and d? Since in the first call of the sum function I have passed the value for only one argument, which is a, then the values for the remaining arguments b, c and d will be taken from the default arguments which I have passed here. Okay, 5, 10 and 15. Okay, then it will make a sum of 10 plus 5 plus 10 plus 15. Okay, and it will return the output. But in the second case of calling some function, here I have passed the values for all the four variables as 10, 20, 30 and 40. So in this case, since I have passed the arguments, so it will not consider these default arguments, it will take the values from this sum function only. Okay, so whenever I didn't mention the values in the calling function, then it will take the values of default arguments. Okay, so now function calls are responsible to pass arguments to functions. Okay, so this is the function call, and this function is responsible for passing the arguments to this function called function. Second point is they are passing a particular value of an argument. Okay, and these functions are passing particular value to the sum function, and the programmer can specify such an argument as a default argument. Okay, so these values which I have initialized to b, c and d are called as default argument. Okay, and if the argument value is missing from the function call, the default value corresponding to the argument is automatically inserted by the compiler and is passed through function call. Okay, so as I have already told you, if the programmer has missed to pass any value in the function call, here as you can see in this function call I have missed of passing the values for these three arguments. Okay, so in this case, since I have not mentioned any values in the function call, then compiler will take the values for those arguments from the default arguments. Okay, so these values will be considered at that time. Next is rules for default argument. Okay, so whenever we use default arguments, then these default arguments must be on the right side in the parameter list of the function. Okay, so these default arguments should be kept on the right side in the parameter list of a function. Okay, so this is the explanation for default arguments. Okay, now we will see an example. Okay, so here I have written down an example. It's the same example. Okay, now I have included the header files, and then I have written the implementation of the sum function with 4 parameters a, b, c and d. Okay, and then I'm adding these 4 values and I'm returning the output to the calling function. Okay, so inside the main function you can see I have made 4 calls the sum function. In the first call of sum function I have passed only the value for the first argument, which is a. Okay, then what about the values for b, c and d? So the values for the arguments b, c and d will take from the default arguments, which are 5, 10 and 15. And in the second call of sum function I have passed the values for only 2 arguments, which are a and b, and the values for the remaining arguments c and d will be taken from the default arguments, which are 10 and 15. And in the third function call of sum I have passed the values for a, b, c arguments, which are 10, 20 and 30, and the value for the last argument will be taken from the default argument, okay, which is 15. So but in the last case you can see in this function call I have passed the values for all the 4 arguments. So in this case compiler will not take any value which I have passed as a default argument. Instead it will take all these 4 values which I have passed in the function call, and then it will make a sum of these numbers and then the output will get returned. Okay, so now we will see that program. Okay, now we will execute that program. Okay, so here in my compiler I have written down the same example. Okay, and let us see what output we will get once I execute this program. Okay, no errors. And when I execute this program you will see in the first function call here I am getting the output as 40. Okay, the value of a is 10, will be taken from this function call, and then the b is 5, which is 15, and then c whose value is 10, which is 25, and then d is 15, which equals to 40. And then in the second call of sum function I am passing the value of 10 and 20 for a and b. So now these two values will get taken for a and b, and then these values will get added up, which equals to 30 plus the value of c, which is 10, 40, and then the value of d, which is 15, which equals to 55. Okay, and in the third call of sum function it will take these 3 values for a, b and c, which equals to 60, and then the third value of d will be taken as a default argument, and which equals to 75. Okay, since in the last call of sum function I have passed the values for all the 4 arguments, so it will take the values from these arguments, okay, and make a sum of these numbers, which equals to 100. Okay, so this is everything about default arguments. Okay, so I hope you understood the concept of default arguments. Okay, so whenever the programmer didn't mention the values for the arguments in the function call, then the compiler will take the values for those arguments from the default arguments list. Okay, so this is the explanation for default arguments. Okay, so I hope you understood the concept of default arguments, and that's all for this video. If you like this video, click on like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and thanks for watching.